If this weak and fleshy boy is to represent us, I strongly advise the issuing of scissor grenades, limbo vapor, and triple blast brain splitters.
What for?
Just generally. Remember, we are going to the north.
Welcome once again to a Tin Dog podcast. Now, this time I'm going to be talking about the Crimson Horror, a story that takes place in the North. Yes, that scariest of all places, a place so terrifying it even worries Sontarans. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be kind of torn about this story. I liked it. Cards on the table, hands down, not a problem, move along. That's not to say I don't have some issues, but then again, haven't we all? As most of you are aware, I sometimes get preview copies. Now, the day that this preview copy arrived in my inbox, I wasn't available. I was actually in Bradford, having a job interview. So it was nice to get home and watch a programme set in the place that I'd just left, admittedly 100 years earlier. Mark Gatiss has a love-hate relationship with the fans. Some of us love him, some of us hate him. A lot of us just hate his work. Now let's separate him from work. He's probably a very nice man. I've never met him. I do have his autograph somewhere, but I've never actually met him. I can't judge the man himself. I can, and am indeed contractually obliged to judge his work. Some of his Doctor Who work has been completely exemplary. The Unquiet Dead, Cold War, absolutely spot on. Many people hold some of his other work in slightly lower regard. Victory of the Daleks simply needed a little bit of tinkering in order to make it, well, acceptable to us fans. But reading between the lines, I suspect that the things that were wrong with Victory of the Daleks are the same things that Mark Gatiss also thinks is wrong with Victory of the Daleks. I will be reviewing his very early Big Finish work, and, if I've got time, also the novel he wrote. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Suffice to say that various times during his Doctor Who tenure, people have been both incredibly impressed and a tiny bit disappointed. The guy does know his Doctor Who. And yes, you do get the feeling he's being trained up to replace the Moff at some point. Because for years the guy wanted to play the Doctor, and now you get the feeling that he wants more power than even that. He wants Moff's job. And you know what? I really don't have a problem with that, not half as much as fandom seems to. This guy knows his Doctor Who. And, in keeping with the rest of this series, we've also got a lovely reference to, in this case, the Fifth Doctor. See, it's in order. Almost. This didn't exactly feel like a Fifth Doctor story, although it did have a black and white flashback as seen in Mawdryn Undead. So if you are looking for tenuous links to earlier Doctor Who stories, something that you didn't see anywhere else, you did see a black and white flashback during Mawdryn Undead, and you didn't see one at any other time, and that was during the Fifth Doctor's time. You also had your lovely throwaway Tegan line.
Ooh, I once spent a hell of a long time trying to get a gobby Australian to Heathrow Airport.
What for?
Search me. Anyway.
Hooray. Yes, stroppy Australian stewardesses. Marvellous. Now, when I first saw the advert for this, I thought, Sweetville, right, it's obviously based around the idea of Bourneville. Now, for those of you who aren't in England, various religious groups like the Quakers in the 1800s set up perfect miniature societies for people to go to. That's obviously the influence behind these stories. But of course, here we have the proto-fascist, or indeed fascist, that is Diana Rigg's Mrs. Gillyflower. Now, many of you already know my real name. Yes, despite what you may think, I'm not actually called Tin Dog, or even Timothy Dog. My original surname of Gilroy was often shortened when I was at school just to Gilly. And this person being called Gillyflower, and the story being set not too far from where I currently live, got my vote straight off. And, of course, the Victorian era being one of my all-time favourite bits of history. And what do you get with the Victorian era? You get Jago and Lightfoot. No, you don't. You get a lizard, a lover, and a potato man. Now, as my wife pointed out, wouldn't it be great if Strax just got his own programme? Hell, if you just let Strax take over the whole of TV for the day, I'm sure we'd be happy. Oh, and just for the record, I loved the Thomas gag. Absolutely hilarious. And I don't care what anyone else says. But the guy is indeed Comedy Sontaran. Now, he's comedy because his character is so pure and so perfect and so well defined. He's not Comedy Sontaran at the expense of being less violent. The guy actually is the person who shoots at the end of the story and saves the day. Enough about the saving of the day and the enormous rocket that seems to have very focused blast radius. More accurate than, say, anything else that anybody else has managed to pull off. The highlight of this whole story isn't, as I'm rather surprised, the reintroduction of Madame Vastra et al. No, it's more, well, Dame Diana Rigg. Again, cards on the table. Gigantic Avengers fan. And by the Avengers, of course, I mean the Avengers that was on UK TV. Steed and Mrs. Peel, Tara King, the new Avengers with Gambit and Purdy. That kind of thing. If you're not familiar with them, I suggest you track them down on YouTube, or at least find them on some sort of obscure channel. Think Austin Powers, but 30 years earlier. Exceptionally English, and Mrs. Peel, played by Diana Rigg, was fantastic. Now, in the Avengers, Mrs. Peel always seemed to be dressed quite casually. Except, of course, near the end of the episode, where all of a sudden she'd be wearing some sort of very tight leather suit. My dad pointed this out to me. It's about the same time that he pointed out that on Star Trek, whenever somebody arrives wearing a red jumper, they're the ones get killed. I'd never spotted this, Mrs. Peel wearing her fighting clothes. And when Jenny the maid removes her clothes and it reveals almost exactly the same costume that Diana Rigg's wearing in the Avengers in order to do her fight scene, I couldn't stop laughing. It was beyond metatextual. It was just gorgeous to behold. Now, my issues with the story are quite minimal, but they do exist. I have an issue with the Doctor not being in the story. For the first 10 minutes, the Doctor's just missing. It feels like a Virgin novelisation. Now, we've got a pretty good idea that the grumbling, groaning monster in the room's going to be the Doctor, but he's just not there. It was beginning to feel like a Doctor Light episode. Now, as we've only got 5 episodes this year, a Doctor Light episode's not going to go down even remotely as well as you think it should. And so we're presented with the Doctor saying, "I'll explain later." And then we get the flashback, the black and white montage moment. But that still had to be filmed. It still had to be recorded. Admittedly, they were snapshots, but they still had to be put into the can. The cameras had to be set up, so the workload was still there. We got the entire plot condensed as if we were watching one of those loose cannon reconstructions of an episode we'd actually missed. In many respects, this was a 2-parter where we only got to see part 2 and a reconstruction of part 1. Once I got beyond the whole being quite cross at missing huge bits of the plot, and of course missing Clara indeed, I could still focus on the narrative of what was going on. Was it just me, or when you were watching the coroner at the beginning, you were thinking of Mark Curtis's butcher from the League of Gentlemen? You see, the League of Gentlemen is set not too far from where this is set. It had the feel of the League of Gentlemen's apocalypse, or more importantly, the feel of those Christmas specials. This was the closest he's ever come to recreating his earlier work. More issues that come up just pop up in passing. Things like the terrible, terrible little worm monster. And was it just me that when she got the enormous pink fluid out and she was saying she hadn't seen anything as hideous as this for 65 million years, were you thinking it was liquidized mercury? Perhaps that was just me. No, a bugbear for this story is something pointless, something meaningless, and something that could probably be explained away, and only really appears because I was thinking about it. You see, in many respects, this story has the same plot as Moonraker. Megalomaniac wants to reinitialize the entire world and uses a poison to kill off all the human beings. In fact, a poison launched from a rocket. Yes, Moonraker, the James Bond story. Again, the Avengers were taking the mick out of James Bond, so it's all kind of nicely circular. But it was the rocket blast as it went up that enormously glorious. Now, I think that's a water tower seen in a couple of weeks ago in the TV series Coast, but it looks just like one of the ones that, again, isn't that far away from me beyond Elland. A place that I'm sure Mark Gatiss visited at some point while he was doing his university course. So like I said, the rocket blast manages to not singe any of the main cast, but that tiny little red rubber monster takes us back all the way to original Doctor Who and the truly terrible monsters that we had to sit through in the 70s. So deep down, I liked it. I truly liked it. I will be coming back to this one considerably more than I'll be coming back to some of the others. It was funny. It was, in many respects, throwaway. But it also had enough darkness and enough characterisation, enough incredible performances from mother and daughter. Yes, there was a Frankenstein feel to the whole thing, and a whole Aryan super race, even if the people hadn't really bought into it. But that I can completely live with. More Victorian Doctor Who, more steampunk references, oh yes please, and more people in bell jars for no adequately explored reason. Before I disappear though, I just want to say that there's been a couple of points come up on the internet that I just thought I should address. Point 1, the most important one, being if the Ice Warrior is a lord, how come he didn't look like an Ice Lord as seen in earlier Doctor Who, especially if they're going to stick to the original design of the Ice Warriors so closely? Well, look at the evidence portrayed on screen. The guy was the greatest warrior. He led from the front. The costume is interchangeable because the lizard inside is basically the same creature regardless of costume. So therefore he wants to lead from the front and he wants to be dressed for the occasion and be rock hard. So he doesn't bother changing into the Ice Lord's costume and stays dressed as he is. Another thing that's been annoying me of late is people complaining about the pronunciation in the story Hyde. There are many arguments, and I know I covered them at the time, but to be fair, is it any worse than the Seventh Doctor calling it Spiridon instead of Spiridon, or Spiridon instead of Spiridon, and a host of other mispronunciations? Staggering Stories put forward a very good idea. When the Third Doctor, in his youth, wanted to visit a place that he thought was called Metabelis, that's what he told everyone, in the same way that you might say Loch instead of Loch. Eventually, in time, you get to find out how things are pronounced correctly, and you go with that. So perhaps Metabelis is the correct pronunciation. I just don't know. And also people saying that it's the crystal. It's completely not the same crystal that he had to return. This is just an ordinary psychic enhancing crystal from the same planet. He doesn't say when he picked it up. He could have picked it up after the destruction of the Great Spider. He could have nipped back and picked one up at some other point. It's really not important. The prop looks completely different. It's a very tiny thing in Hyde. Again, with pronunciations, you're talking about ghasts and not ghosts. Well, a ghast is a type of noise-making ghost seen again in Scotland, or rather heard. So yes, the guy refers to it as a ghast because it is a very noisy ghost. Ghost being the collective term, ghast being a specific type, like poltergeist would still be a ghost. So there's some points that I thought about to deal with in passing. You might or might not agree with me. It doesn't really matter because, deep down, this is just a TV show. So until next time, when I'll be talking about probably something to do with Doctor Who, be seeing you. You've been listening to the Tin Dog Podcast. Doctor Who and its connected properties are copyright and trademark of the BBC. No infringement is intended. To contact the show, email tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk. Whostrology, a Time Traveller's Almanac, is available through Telos Publishing or Amazon. Visit www.whostrology.com for further information. The Tin Dog Podcast is a founder member of the Doctor Who Podcast Alliance.
What exactly have you done with your life? Bit parts in Rep and one episode of Doctor Who. What an illustrious career to look back on.
But at least I've had a career, and I'm still at it. I'm still working. You've had nothing. You've done nothing.